We don't necessarily have a plan to deal with that yet. So it would actually cause material harm. It might be a short-term pain that we have to go through, but it's not something that you can just sort of do with a stroke of the pen.
Joe, I'm so sorry. I'm going to have to interrupt because we've got the Treasurer on standby. Cool. It's going to take a lot of money to recover after the bushfires. And yesterday, the Prime Minister announced a $2 billion fund to help fire-affected Aussies get back on their feet. The fund will come at a cost of a budget surplus. But Scott Morrison has vowed to do whatever it takes to cover the costs. And the Treasurer, Josh Frydenberg, joins us now from Canberra. Treasurer, thank you so much for waiting. We do appreciate your time this morning. This announcement really couldn't come soon enough. Your government was long warned about the severity of the bushfire season, but your critics say that no one was listening. What do you say to that?
Well, we've been working for some time on a range of measures to deal with the unprecedented fires that we've seen with the tragic loss of life and property. This contribution of $2 billion to the National Bushfire Recovery Fund is an initial contribution, and it's additional to existing disaster recovery payments and allowances. There's also been an unprecedented call-out of up to 3,000 ADF reservists. We've seen Chinook and Black Hawk helicopters ferrying firefighters and emergency service personnel into the most difficult terrain. We've seen our amphibious naval vessels evacuate people from Malakuta Beach, and we've seen a whole range of other initiatives taken across the federal government. And we'll work closely with the state government to ensure that people get the support that they need.
Good on you for that, Treasurer, but how will it actually work? I mean, we've seen already the RFS Commissioner in New South Wales only found out about those 3,000 reservists being deployed through the media because of a communication breakdown between the state and federal agencies. We know with the drought recovery effort, there were councils getting $1 million grants when they weren't in drought and actually handing them back. How will it actually work, and how can you ensure that this money goes to the people who need it the most?
Well, the new recovery agency, which is under the leadership of former Federal Police Commissioner Andrew Colvin, is modelled on our response to the North Queensland floods. And what we will do with this $2 billion is provide support for small businesses. I mean, a lot of farmers and primary producers will need help replanting, restocking. There will be support for tourism operators. There will be support for wildlife restoration and protection, given the enormous damage that's been caused to our native flora and fauna. There will be a mental health package. There will be support for local councils, and of course we'll help rebuild community and economic infrastructure. That's what's critical for these communities. So this will help rebuild lives and restore livelihoods, and that's going to be critical for the long-term future and viability of these communities.
I know you're dealing with what is happening as we speak, getting help out there with this $2 billion, but what about the future, preventing the bushfire season being longer, tougher, and also drought-proofing the country? What have you done about that?
Well, there's no doubt we face drier, hotter conditions, and these fires have come after an extensive drought, which has meant that the conditions are really adverse. We've also seen a build-up of fuel, and
what
the
are you doing to prevent it in the future?
So there'll be lots of lessons to be learnt, and the Prime Minister's already foreshadowed a formal inquiry where we'll work with the states to ensure that we learn their lessons and we can be better protected.
On and on and on for years, for decades, for centuries.
And we've had fires before too.
And we have had fires. So why haven't we done more to know it's going to happen in the future? What have you actually done, you know, financially, physically, to prevent what we are undergoing now?
Well, we work closely with the states and we provide funding on an annual basis, including, for example, aerial firefighting support. Now, these fires have required extra planes, and we've announced $20 million for the leasing of 4 firefighting aircraft. And of course, the ADF call-out is unprecedented. So there are a lot of things that we have been doing, that we'll continue to do, and that we'll be doing into the future as well. So our focus is not on the budget bottom line, our focus is on the bottom line of supporting these communities who are really in need.
Treasurer, this week former Foreign Minister Julie Bishop, a former colleague of yours, called for Australia to respond to the bushfire crisis by showing leadership, as a direct quote there, on climate change. Is she right?
Well, Australia is part of an international solution to reducing emissions because it's an international problem. And Julie was a member of a cabinet that not only signed up and ratified the Paris Agreement, but also to 26 to 28% reduction in our emissions by 2030 on the levels of 2005. Now, our emissions are down by around 13% from that time. While our emissions are down since 2005, New Zealand's are up. China's is up, India's is up, Canada's is only marginally down. So what we have to acknowledge is there is a transition in important sectors like the energy sector in Australia, where 1 in 5 Australian households have solar panels on their roofs, where 25% of our energy is coming from renewable sources. We've seen coal-fired power stations close around the country, and there is a transition, but we need to do so in a really cost-effective way, and the amount of renewable energy investment in Australia has been about double what we've seen in France and Germany and in the United Kingdom. So there is a lot of good things that have occurred in Australia with the implementation of new technologies to reduce our carbon footprint.
And speaking of that, Treasurer, and the previous cabinet you referred to, we only have the Prime Minister we have at the moment pretty much because the Liberal Party and the National Parties junked the energy policy that you yourself crafted as Energy Minister, which was designed to find a balance between low prices and reducing emissions. A lot of people have said that that would be far more impressive and a far better way to tackle emissions and climate change than the policy that is or isn't around today. How frustrated are you that that policy that you crafted as Energy Minister was just cast into the wind for no apparent reason other than political expediency and to appease the hard right rump of the coalition?
Well, Joe, within the National Energy Guarantee there was a reliability component, and that has actually been implemented now by the government working with the states, and that's really important because as we move to more intermittent sources of power generation, I'm talking about wind and solar, so when the wind's not blowing, the sun's not shining, power's not being generated, you need to have backup. And that might be in the form of batteries, that may be in the form of pumped hydro, like Snowy 2.0, and other technologies. That is a really important component of the National Energy Guarantee, which has been implemented. As for other energy policies, we're underwriting new generation, which is really important, particularly for industrial customers. It might surprise your viewers to know that 2/3 of energy demand in Australia is actually commercially related. It's not household related. And so supporting those commercial and business enterprises and industrial users with reliable energy is critically important, and that's what we're doing.
All right, $2 billion is a pretty good start when it comes to recovering from these bushfires. Treasurer Josh Frydenberg, thank you very much for your time this morning. We do appreciate it.
Thanks.
No, thank you.